Good morning. Welcome to my shop. Today we're going to do some turning. We have some Christmas ornaments that we need to get caught up on. We usually put our Christmas ornaments out starting in September. Our inventory is a little on the low side. We need to turn some acorns. So we're going to start with those today. Those are a Christmas hanging ornament that look similar to this, and we are going to, these hang on the tree like this. The top will come off, and you could put a little gift in there, a pair of earrings, money, put a card on here with the person's name, hang it on the tree, and then Christmas morning they can go about looking on the tree, find the ornament with their name on it, and that's their gift along with the ornament itself. So let's get started. For the body of the acorn, we'll be using some maple or ash, whichever one we have in stock. I believe this is ash, and we'll be using mahogany for the top. This particular mahogany is called sapele. Has a real nice shimmer to it. It turns real good. The first thing that we want to do is we want to get our block in our 4-jaw chuck. These blocks are, I believe they're 2 inches square by 4 inches. So we'll get these in our 4-jaw chuck. If you hear the train in the background, I apologize for that. I don't have much control over background noise. Okay, we've got it mounted in our 4-jaw chuck. We've got plenty of pressure on the tailstock. Lock the tailstock down. Make sure it clears the rest. Everything's tight. And here, at this point, we'll just turn it around. And when we get this round, we will be back. After turning this round, we're going to change out our 60-degree cone live center and put a 7/8 inch box core bit in our drill chuck. And we're going to drill the inside of the body approximately 1 1/4 inches deep. We have the inside bored out to 7/8 of an inch and 1 1/4 inches deep. And at this point we're going to do some sanding. We'll start sanding with 120 grit and work our way through 400 grit. When we get this completed, then we'll do some finish work, starting with Mylan's sanding sealer and some friction polish and some wax. Here we are going to apply 2 coats of sanding sealer. We will be sanding at 320 grit between each coat. After the final coat, we will be waxing the inside to give it a smooth finished feeling. Here we're using compressed air to carefully blow out the dust. We don't want any dust between the coats of sanding sealer. Here we are applying the final coat of sanding sealer to the interior of the acorn. Since the inside of the acorn will receive as much attention as the outside, we want to make sure that we do a proper finish to the inside. We want it to be as smooth to the touch as the outside. We're going to apply 2 coats of wax to the inside, and after that's done and we buff it out at a high speed, then we will cut a tenon for the cap. Cut the tenon right here. We're ready to cut a tenon right here on the end for our cap that will sit on there later. The tenon will look something like this. We'll cut that with a square nose cutter. We're going to use this wrench for our sizing, and that is sized according to the drill bit that we're going to use later on to bore out the top of the lid. We're going to use a Forstner bit to make that hole in the lid, and that's the same size, so we're going to use this for our gauge. Good and snug. Good and snug. If that's too tight, when we make the lid, we'll just sand the inside of the mortise of the lid until it fits snug on here. So that's complete. The next step would be to shape the bottom of the acorn. We'll show you some of that. We're going to bring the tailstock up for some support to stop some of the vibration. I'll only put slight pressure here because this wall is getting thin, just enough to stop the vibration so there won't be so much noise. And we'll see if we can move this. Just a little bit. Here we go. At this point, we're going to go ahead and part it off so that later on we can turn it around and finish the bottom. So we'll part that off as close to the chuck as we can, hopefully without hitting the chuck. Move the tail stalk out of the way. Let's see if we can do this without any alibis. Here we go. We'll finish that when we turn it around. We'll put this on a chuck, on a jam chuck, so that we can finish the bottom and do the sanding and put the finish on it, and that'll complete the bottom of the acorn. When we get ready to do all that, we'll come back and show you how that's done. Now that we have the general shape of the body of the acorn, we need to turn it around in this fashion in order to finish the end of it. You can either use a jam chuck in your 4-jaw chuck to mount this, or these collets, which I have. This collet fits in here, tightens up with this screw, and then that'll mount into the drill chuck. So we're going to put this in and tighten it up. And then we're going to put it in the drill chuck. When we get that all mounted in here, we'll be back. Have to be careful about tightening this up too tight. It will crack if you're not careful. So let me get this mounted and we'll be back. Okay, we've got it mounted in the drill chuck. It appears to be running pretty true. It'll probably move before it's over. We're going to bring the tailstock up, put a little bit of pressure on it. This piece here comes from a company called Rubber Chucky. They have rubber cones of different shapes. Some people call them a soft touch, but the company is rubberchucky.com, I believe. I'll put that down below for you to see. We'll tighten this up just slightly, just enough to hold it. Bring the tool rest up. Make sure it's not touching anywhere. It's off just slightly, which is to be expected. And I think we're turning this up around 2000 RPM. I'm just going to touch this off a little bit, shape it. When we get that done, we'll be back to show you the sanding and finishing of it. Here we have sanded the bottom of the acorn down to 320 grit, and now we'll apply 2 coats of sanding sealer, sanding at 320 grit between each coat. Then we will apply 2 coats of friction polish, and finally we'll buff it out with 2 coats of paste wax. Be sure when you do this process that you use paper towels and not shop towels or rags. If they were to get caught up on the turning project, they could either hurt you or tear your project up. So always use paper towels. Okay, now that we have the body completed, it's time to turn the lid. I'm going to use this mahogany, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll put this in the 4-jaw chuck. And just like the body, once we get it in here, we'll turn it round. Bring up the tailstock. Plenty of pressure. Bring up the tool rest. And we'll turn this round. Change our piece out of our tailstock, and we'll use a Forstner bit to drill the mortise for the tenon on the body. And we're gonna put this, about a ½ inch deep, about the depth of the head of the Forstner bit. That should be deep enough. Smells like that Forstner bit needs to be sharpened. Okay. Now we're going to change things around. We'll be back in a minute. While we have access to the inside of the lid, we're going to put on a couple of coats of wax to keep the body from sticking. Then we're going to shape and bring the cap down to its final size just before we turn it around. Here we're turning at approximately 2000 RPM. Now we've got this shaped just about the way we want it, and we will do a quick fit of the body before we break this loose. Make sure it's what we want. It's a very tight fit. I may sand the inside of this just a little bit. So that it won't be quite so tight. Maybe a little bit too tight. Each one needs to be custom fit, so to speak. Even though I use that open end wrench as my gauge, the slightest bit of difference from one to the other. Of course, the Forstner bit is always a fixed tool. And I cut this mortise in here. That'll never change. But the cutting the tenon and using that open end wrench for a gauge, sometimes that's off a little bit one way or the other. Okay, at this point we're going to cut it loose and prepare things to turn it around, and so that we can finish the other side and the very top. And we'll be back when we get set up for that. Here we have removed the 4-jaw chuck, reinstalled the drill chuck with the number 2 Morse taper. We're going to mount our acorn cap onto the expansion collet as we did before. Using this expansion collet in the drill chuck, we can finish off the top, finish shaping it. After we shape it, we'll sand it up through all the grits through 320. After we have completed this process, we will take the 60-degree cone off of the tailstock, which will reveal a very sharp pin. We will use this pin to make a mark in the very top of the cap, an indentation, so that we can find that with a small drill bit and drill a hole in anticipation of installing an eye hook. Once again, we are turning approximately 2000 RPM. At this point, we've got the finish on it. We got it waxed. Here we're going to try to put a eye hook in the top for a ribbon to hang it on the tree. Okay. Let's see if we can get this out. Okay, there's the body and the lid, and there's finished Christmas ornament. Well, that wraps up another project in the shop. I hope you've enjoyed spending time here. I encourage you to get out and go to the shop. All you wood turners, woodworkers, make something. Be safe. I hope to see you next time, right here in the Briar Patch with Mike and Samson, my shop dog.